Hi, it's Jason again. This is a great recipe. It's my favorite dessert recipe. It's my coconut macaroon. I hope you enjoy it. We're gonna go ahead and start assembling the pieces for our macaroon. So the first thing that we're gonna do is take one full bag of the decimated pulverized coconut and put that into the blender. So you'll notice it's a little lighter than before. It's not nearly as long and stringy. This gives it a much lighter texture. So we'll get all that into our mixing bowl here. Into this mix, what I like to do is slowly incorporate some of my different ingredients. So what you'll see is we're going to bring in 1 stick of can butter melted, 1 can of condensed milk, and I've got some extract of both coconut and vanilla that I like to add. So we'll be adding those in. So again, we're just gonna slowly go through this. So what we'll do is we'll just turn it on really slow. And as it goes, I like to start with the condensed milk. So you simply take the condensed milk and just let it drizzle in a little. And this is so goopy and slimy and it's so good. And all we're really looking for is just to kind of get this mixed in, and we're starting to see it to clump together a little. Remember, in traditional cooking, we're almost making like a dough here. And you'll start to see it's starting to get a little more clumpy. Slowly, about half the can's in right now. Once I get pretty much half the can, maybe 2/3 of the can in, I like to hold off and let it run a little so I can get a good look of how it's going. I like to scrape in from the sides and make sure I'm getting all of that luscious condensed milk into the macaroon. Then I like to add my extract. Extract's very powerful. Again, I like to add vanilla, and recently I started adding coconut just to give it a little extra kick. Just drizzle that in as well. And now you're gonna get this big aroma of coconut and vanilla, and it's really starting to come together well. And this is where we bring our can butter in. This is about room temperature now. And what I like to do is control the pacing of this, because I want to try to get it all in so I'm still accurate with my actual medical benefits that I see off of this, or how much of the can butter is being taken into this, so I can make my macaroons knowing the full amount of can butter that's been in. What that brings us is to about 350 to 400 total milligrams of THC that we've added to this mixture. And as I can see, I'm starting to get it really nice. What I like to do now is probably stop it, drop the bowl down, and start to kind of give it a good mix in here. Because the last thing that we're gonna add into this as we start to bring all of our mixture together is we're gonna fold some egg whites in here to bring it a little more kind of light fluffiness to the macaroon, so it really gives it that extra kind of wang. So let's get this here. Okay, as this finishes going through, we're gonna add the last little bit of our condensed milk. And it just kind of brings it all together now. It's really important that you try to make sure you get this well distributed as possible. Fortunately, the can butter really kind of got spread through initially very well on this. So now that we're going to finish the condensed milk, we'll let this go just a little bit longer, and then we'll let the bowl release and we'll scrape off of the mixer here. I will tell you again, just to be a little bit cautious, I like licking the spatula when I'm making cookies and brownies and stuff. If you do that when you're doing it with your weed edibles, you're gonna have a very exciting evening. You may not remember it, but that's okay. But just remember, you're working with some very concentrated stuff, so it may not feel like it. But just a little bite of this might be 5 or 6 milligrams. So really be cautious as you go through and use this. So let's take this off. Mixing the actual wax and then the condensed milk and all the different sugars, it's really powerful. So what you're up gonna have is a mixture that looks something like this right now. And you can see, very beautiful. Separate the yolks from the egg whites. So if you've ever done this, really pretty easy. Just simply crack an egg in half, and then just take 1/2 and just allow the egg white to fall in and just keep that yolk. So what we're gonna do now is just simply turn this on, and we're just gonna beat these egg whites, and you wanna put a little amount of speed into them. When I do this, I only use about half of it initially. I fold it into the coconut, And then I do the other half. And what you'll see by doing that is it actually keeps the coconut much lighter. So now you're starting to see we're getting really good air into this. It's starting to look very beautiful. It's not to that point where it's peaking too much, but it's just starting to get air bubbles into it. I'll keep going, probably another minute or so on this. Man, I can already see it. I can see the fluffiness this is going to be adding to the macaroon. I think you'll really enjoy it. Now I think we're getting right to the stage. I can feel it getting a little thicker. I'm going to go ahead and slow her down. And I think we're going to get the perfect egg whites right now. And what I'm going to do is take about half of this mixture. And if anyone's ever told you to fold anything in and you weren't sure, I'm going to show you an easy way to do it. I'm putting about half of this egg whites in here now. And you're not stirring or doing anything like that. You're simply taking a little from the bottom, putting it on the top, and then folding it over. And what you'll get is this really nice, light fluffiness. You can already feel it as I'm mixing this into the batter. You can start to see it's becoming lighter. Even when I lift up, I can tell that this is lighter than it was from when I first started working with it. So at this point, we got our first batch of this kind of done, and now I feel we can incorporate the second amount of the eggs. So we'll go ahead and pour those in, make sure we get all of that. So the eggs just act as kind of a vehicle to incorporate more air into this, and we're getting this really light material, dough-like right now, which is going to be great when we go to make our macaroons. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that sit for a second as we're done, and we're going to get a tray and get ready to make our cookies. So what I'm going to do now is take this. A real interesting thing is when I used to make these, I would pack this thing really tight and jam it down. And it gave you a very dense cookie, which tasted really good, but it was almost too dense. And now we're trying to lighten them up a little. So what I like to do is just very simply get in here, scoop it against the side of the wall, but don't try to force it down, and then just simply put it on here. Now let me tell you, one of the best things in life right now are these silicone pads because nothing sticks to them. So if you're looking at actually baking, I highly recommend you use these. If you don't have these available, at least put wax paper down. So all we're going to do is, and one of the things that's very important is that you keep count of how many you do, because that's going to give you an understanding of the strength or the dosage basically of each one of these. So in the example where we were at about 400 milligrams altogether, if we make 20 of these, if we do the math, that's very simply 400 divided by 20, or roughly 20 milligrams a cookie, which depending on what level you're comfortable with, that may be way too strong for a lot of people. So what I like to do here, sometimes when I'm trying to bake for others, I'll take about a half a stick of my can of butter and then add a half a stick of normal butter. So that way what I've done is reduce the total milligram count down to somewhere in the neighborhood of around 200 milligrams. So each cookie comes in at about 10. Because one of the challenges of making these is they're so tasty, people kind of forget that they're actually edibles, and they put themselves in a pretty tough situation sometimes because they eat too many and they enjoy it, and then what do? They have another. And then they have another. And what that simply does is brings us to the point where they don't realize they've consumed 4 cookies at 10 or 20 milligrams each, and that puts them in a very challenging position to be able to get up to go to work the next day. Before I actually started scooping these out, just a note, I went on and set the oven to 350 degrees. That's a really good temperature for these. Runs probably about a half hour, but we're going to want to keep our eye on them. So let's just get these laid out, and man, these are looking good. I think I've used about half of the actual dough right now, so it looks like we're going to have 15, so maybe we're going to get about 30 of these. Now what we've done is use our scoop to put the balls of the macaroons on the actual tray. You can notice I kept them pretty well spread out. They form these perfectly beautiful balls. We're going to stick these in the oven at 350 degrees and hope that they come out perfectly golden brown. They should take about 30 minutes. So let's put these in the oven. All right, now we've pulled the macaroons out of the oven, and I have to tell you, they are beautiful golden brown When you're cooking them, watch it, especially if you're doing multiple trays in your oven and some's a little hotter than the other. I like to move them around a little, but what you'll see is this beautiful finish on these macaroons. Golden brown, crisp on the outside, just brown on the top. And now what we're ready to do is to prepare our chocolate for dipping. So again, I'm firing up the double boiler, and we're gonna go through this process, melt our chocolate down, and then dip the macaroons in a wonderful, wonderful dark chocolate. I prefer dark chocolate. You can use milk, but I think the contrast between the dark chocolate and the macaroon is phenomenal. So we'll let the water heat up, we'll get our double boiler going, and then we'll go ahead and make our chocolate ready for dipping. So let's get that going, and then we'll dip some macaroons, and then we're almost at the finish line. Okay, so the easiest way to melt chocolate is very simply use a double boiler, get a nice aggressive boil going to it, and then simply bring your chocolate in. What you'll notice is with chocolate, you never want to go too quick. It's really, you want to temper the chocolate. But if you just take your time, let it melt naturally, don't try to rush it, you'll see how simple this is. It's really just a very, very gentle heating of the chocolate to get it to melt down, using a really good rubber spatula to keep the chocolate working. Now you can really start to see it become smooth. Once you get in here, we're probably about a minute away from having really great chocolate to dip in. The one thing I will tell you is, depending on your speed, sometimes you got to put the chocolate back onto the double boiler to get it back into this really kind of nice, very smooth, almost liquidy format of it. Because if you take too long, it tends to harden up, and then what you'll find is you get these really thick layers of chocolate, which are good, but honestly, it overpowers the macaroon. So if you have the ability, just make sure you're keeping your chocolate in here, get it nice and smooth like this. You can see it's now completely liquid. So at this point, what I'll probably do is turn our burner down just a bit. So we'll ease it on down some. So what we'll do is put our towel away here, get it out of our way, and then what we'll just really do is, when you see the chocolates at this point where it's just that lush, simply take one of your macaroons, and at this point, simply take it from the box, gently put it in the chocolate, and then what I like to do is just get a real simple scrape off of it so you get a nice coating of chocolate, and then put it on our tray. It's that simple. There's not a whole lot to this, except for we're going to do a little design here at the end. But what you want to do is you want to make sure you're not putting too much of a layer of chocolate on the bottom for many reasons, but probably one of the biggest reasons is it just overpowers this delicate taste of the coconut you've already established, and you hate to do all that work to make these wonderful coconut macaroons only to have them end up tasting like a Hershey's bar. Okay, so we've got this now. Now, one of my favorite things at the end, of course, taste the chocolate. But now is to get a little more creative. And the way I like to do this is usually I think it's still loose enough, the chocolate is I simply just take the bowl. So I'll probably grab my towel again real quick and bring the bowl over. Here's a little tip. Be very careful when you're pulling it off a double boiler, because there's going to be water at the bottom of your bowl, and if you're not careful, you'll drip it all over your macaroons and ruin these great macaroons. So I'm just going to take it right here, and then what I like to do is just do a little simple paintbrush motion and start putting chocolate all over these things. Alrighty, so let's pop these in the fridge, and then we'll come back and take one final look at our macaroons. So you put the macaroons in, and you should wait around 20 minutes, or you could be like me and just go ahead and steal one. Oh my God, this is so good. Hey everyone, this is Jason again. I'm really I shouldn't do this while I'm super stoned. I thought this was gonna be a good idea.